Throughout the following presentation, we will discuss each individual roles of ourselves and the different mechanics of the game. We will extensively discuss in detail the highlights of Altum. We have provided a documentation which covers the pitch of Altum, as well as an extensive look on all the topics that we will be covering today. At the end of the presentation, we have provided a technical demo walkthrough of Altum. On behalf of Pink Sheep Studios, we hope that you thoroughly enjoy the rest of the presentation. The battle mechanics play a major role in this technical demo. Overall, they include random enemy encounters based on the area in which the player is wandering around. The possibility of encountering an enemy is randomized depending on which room the player is at the current moment. Highlighted with a yellow outline, the encounter box was set up transparent red during the development phase for debugging reasons. The biggest technical issue is finding out how to program the encounter in such a way where the player didn't encounter it too often, or it wasn't something that you didn't see very much of. We solved this by resetting the encounter object variables every time the player enters a new room and rolling the chances only when the controlled character steps into an encounter box. Also, a programming bug made the player re-enter the battle immediately after finishing it. It was solved by creating a stopwatch object which is set to a 5-second period of time when the player cannot re-enter.
The player health bar shows two values. Number 1 is health, which can be increased or decreased during battle depending on player and enemy actions. Number 2, the special points, which can be consumed to use more advanced moves, such as ones that can confuse the enemy, increase player stats, or ones that do more damage than usual. The special points can be increased by using the character's minor moves, which do little damage.
The attack formula until further modifications. A equals character attack, B equals enemy defense, X equals move attack power, C equals critical, S equals status, and R equals random number between 0.85 to 1.2.
The attack formula is based on character attack power, the move power, and target defense, which are multiplied with numbers based on buffs and debuffs which affect the target. This formula keeps the fight balanced, and the player will need to plan ahead with strategy in order to be victorious. On the other side, the enemy uses the same formula when attacking the player. The AI for the battle is written in such a way so it will not be too easy or too hard for the player to defeat. In the demo, we have 3 status changes. 1. Bleeding. This decreases the affected target's health and weakness to its attack power. Number 2, poisoning, decreasing the affected target's health and weakness in its defense. Number 3, confusion, the target being unable to execute a move.
Leveling up. After each battle, if the player is victorious, the character will receive experience points based on the enemy it's faced, and if the points go over a value, it levels up. This automatically makes the player's health increase to maximum, and its status value, attack, defense, speed, and agility get increased by a certain percentage. Because in order to face strong enemies, the character needs to be strong itself, so grinding for a level is sometimes necessary, also increasing the play value.
The first thing I did was image collection. This is a collection of photographs and illustrations. This would make sure my creature and character designs were somewhat informed, making them much more believable and have a much stronger foundation. I also looked into models and celebrities to get references of people. Similar to the process taken by Kojima Productions with their visualization of their character Snake from Metal Gear Solid. His inspirations were Mel Gibson and Kurt Russell. I began to use these references as soon as the characters were conceptualized in words on a character sheet. This meant I had somewhere to start from, meaning I wouldn't be lost. After mood boards and idea generation was complete, next on the list was silhouettes and basic shapes for the characters. This means I can pump out designs very quickly, usually about 3 in an hour. After silhouettes, I moved on to facial expressions, so I could make sure I have an appealing design as well as understand how the characters would express themselves. Up next was clothes design. This is my favourite part. This is where I could really bring the characters to life in both detail and design. Then it was a combination of the two, making sure I had a full body design that I was happy with and ready to finalise. As we approached final design, most of the characters in the game had been cut due to limitations on production time. In the final cut, the remaining characters were Beryl, Valkyrie, the barman, the elderly couple, and mafia men for the player to attack. The next step was to bring the characters to life. I used Photoshop and its timeline tool to animate them. I used a bunch of game assets to help inspire me in my own way, such as Final Fantasy and Don't Starve. These were all low frame rate, so I knew if I followed them, I'd get the same outcome. After the characters were completed, we moved on to environment design. I knew this place would need to look dark, treacherous, and scary at times, so I looked to see if we could make the game much darker. I asked the programmers for a solution. They said they could definitely do it, and the outcome was amazing. It added a lot more life and depth to the game, as you can see. As for architecture, I knew I needed a simple Victorian style. I used photo references to help me achieve this. The location was a raggedy old harbour, so I knew broken buildings would be a key feature too. One of the biggest problems I faced was the amount of time it took to animate 2D sprites. This meant in the long run we had to cut out a lot from the actual game, meaning that we only had one level and a collection of characters to really show off what the game was about. Initially we wanted about 3 levels. Some were more open than others. The player could explore, have combat, level up, around 4 or 5 enemy types, as well as a large collection of characters they could all use and play as. This also had a problem for the programmers, seeing as they'd have to program all of the combat for these characters. If there was anything I'd like to go back and change, it would be the inconsistencies of the character designs. If we were ever to carry this project on for any longer, I feel as if I'd have to redraw most of the character assets. And finally, the fact that we could only fit one environment in, and not several. As for time constraints, I felt it was necessary not to alter these faults.
Audio design has given our game a refreshing form of life and storytelling. Each piece of music and sound portrays an added story to the environment and fuels the emotion throughout. This has given the project a finalised appearance that we can display within the final product. In regard to the soundtrack, the team requested an acoustic score to represent the more emotional aspect of the project. With this in mind, I created a chord progression within the major scale, but with an applied capo on the lighter frets to simulate a softer sound. Taking heavy inspiration from audio replacement in documentaries such as BBC's Planet Earth, released on the 5th of March 2006, I began building a library of Foley examples to reflect upon and learn the basics of audio engineering. I achieved this by venturing out to find exactly how the soundscapes were constructed for each of my examples. The majority of my focus from early production to December consisted of creating both the soundtrack and audioscape for Altum. This allowed me to complete the Foley early on and turn my attention to video editing and narrative writing. However, I returned to Foley to improve the audio quality and add to the foundations that were already constructed early on. Taking advantage of knowing an aspiring voice actor, I arranged a day in which I had access to professional standard recording equipment and recorded a narration written within the narrative. The results were positive, and later, when applying a ghoulish effect to the lines, we had a main tour in which we could tell the story of Altum.
But even gods must come to an end. The entity began to fester and perish. As each day welcomed the Deathbringer to the Behemoth's door, power started to fade alongside the hopes of a better future.
But even gods must come to an end. The entity began to fester and perish. As each day welcomed the Deathbringer to the Behemoth's door, Power started to fade alongside the hopes of a better future.
To achieve the ghost-like vocals, I duplicated the lines, reversed one, deepened the male voice, and applied an echo to both layers. The first section of development for our technical demo gave me the knowledge of audio softwares that I needed to fulfill my intentions with the Foley and Altum soundtrack. Using Audacity to record and improve basic audio, I was able to manipulate narratives to sound monstrous as well as improve their already existing quality by reducing the level of noise that the microphone would pick up. FL Studio was used to take the separate instrumental tracks and apply them together to finalise the score. Using a MIDI keyboard, I could simulate string sections and electronic orchestral sounds. Franchises such as George Lucas's 1977 Star Wars A New Hope paved the audio landscape by applying what we now associate with sci-fi sound effects. In order to give a professional standard outcome in regards to audio, I heavily researched into previous composers and media that included impressive Foley. Video game wise, the Batman Arkham series included incredible examples of audio manipulation to simulate and exaggerate sounds. A prime example of this would be using a thick acrylic impacting with a motorcycle helmet to mimic Batman's intense punches. The battle theme was inspired by the original Phantom of the Opera soundtrack that used church organs to highlight the horror elements of the story. Notably, Hammer House characters such as Nosferatu and Count Vlad the Impaler also shared this instrument upon their arrival. It was these old horror films that inspired the visuals of the game, and when used in a battle scenario created an intense combat system. Following the grim theme of Altum, it was crucial to use techniques such as writing within the minor scale to convey that tone. This is seen in Altum's main theme. The method of writing in the minor scale originates from soundtracks from old horror and thriller themes such as the 1973 cult classic Halloween and The Exorcist of the same year. When it comes to production, most studios tend to follow a standard overall pipeline for development. However, sub-pipelines and team layout change drastically depending on the team size and consists of the game being worked on. For example, since our game is 2D and we're a small team, we've had no need for a modelling pipeline, and most of us have main roles. However, we do help each other out. Studios also make use of version control and project management during production too. The first stage of Altum was concepting, not to be confused with concept art. During this stage, the studio brainstormed ideas that could be turned into a new, unique and fun video game. Eventually we came up with Altum. Our team started out by discussing the world of our game, what it's like, who lives there, what would be the main goal of the player character. After coming to a conclusion of what we wanted this to be, we shifted on to writing up character sheets. Originally we came up with random characters since this was more fun and engaging, but they seemed out of place in our world, so over the coming days we ironed them in to fit in. The pre-production stage is where art and coding come into play. This stage focuses primarily on the creation and design documents outlining story, mechanics, goals, level design and much more. It's at this stage that a platform for the game is chosen, as to determine whether the game's mechanics are viable and how they would be achieved. The coders work on prototyping these mechanics, while the artists/designers create concept art for the things like characters, objects and scenery. For games that have a story, designers will create storyboards and scripts during this stage as well. During this stage, our team used the character sheets and lore documents that were created in the previous stage of concept character designs and story. Instead of focusing on the entire game, we focused solely on the features present in the demo. We did not create an overall design document, however we did create many smaller documents that outline what we wanted the game to look like, how mechanics worked and how the story would be for our technical demo. Our coders worked on creating a working prototype for the turn-based combat system and overall movement, while our artists and designers concepted our characters and created a technical view of the level map. We also drew up some demo scripts for voice narration in the game to get an understanding on whether it would be something we wanted to pursue in our final technical demo. Overall we did go for this. This stage of development took longer to complete than concepting, however it helped us understand where the game was heading and we managed to tackle the most difficult problems early in development. In the production stage, a studio will start producing the actual game. This means the coders will create the game mechanics using prototypes as a guideline, the artists will start turning their concept into real final assets, and the designers will start work on finalising foley, narrative and music, or alternatively outsourcing them. Due to the sheer amount of work to be done during this stage, most organised studios use management softwares to keep track of tasks completed and yet to be completed, as well as version control to prevent the loss of code. This is the longest stage of development typically. With the use of Bitbucket and Trello, we've managed to stay organised and on top of our tasks. We've used the prototypes for the turn-based combat and overworld movement to create a single program capable of both of them. Here's an example of our project management. We decided Trello since it's easy to use for those new to the project management software. As you can see, each card holds a task to be completed and are separate by art, code and collaborations, meaning a mixture of them both. On top of that, each card has a variety of labels. These are the skills required to do the task on the card, as well as whether the card is something important that needs to be done first. Organising our project management out like this has made it much easier for us to see tasks that need completing and choosing tasks best suited to our abilities. Thanks to widgets and add-ons for Trello, we will also have access to a burn down chart based on our performance. Originally we were going to use GitHub, however Bitbucket was much more new user friendly. In order to reduce errors and act as professionally as possible, we use branches for coding additions to the game, or for testing things that may crash the program before merging them back together into the main branch. Unfortunately, Bitbucket doesn't have a pipeline for GML code, so we were unable to use it for our main source control. Our development model is very similar to the interactive model we talk about in our industry research, making parts at a time, testing them and then implementing them into the game. When having hand-drawn animations, we encountered multiple issues. First of all, they looked amazing, but unfortunately there comes with a bitter part. The collisions are very hard to program. One of the problems we encountered was the character's hair being stuck on collision blocks when turning around, so we agreed that it was better to give the character a box-shaped collision that will cover only the feet, and this seems to cover the problem more than well. Given the fact that the overworld consists of more than one layer was one of our easiest technical challenges. We created a well-structured map that made the room transition smoothly and without any memory leaks. Creating doors that will send the player from one place to another was achieved by using a door parent, which takes the ID of the next room and the coordinates where the player will be spawned. Adding an inventory system was a great method of giving a character extra perks or status points. Coding this system, although, was a serious part of the game because each item had its own properties. Being a turn-based RPG, characters attack based on their speed attribute. The combat with the highest speed will do the action first. Around then to when every character on the fight scene has executed a move, excluding the characters that are disabled by other debuffs. The technical challenge itself was to code the attacks, defense, buffing and debuffing moves in a good manner, to avoid memory leaks and to allow the program to compile quickly and smoothly. Another challenge that we encountered was implementing the special points that allowed the character to use one or more of his advanced moves. We agreed on having a basic moveset that has an insignificant effect on the enemy but which helps increase the special points, and thus in later turns the player will be able to have a bigger impact on the battle. Last but not least is the battle AI. That represents a big challenge when speaking in terms of programming, because we wanted the enemies not to be a too simplistic challenge for the player. Therefore we had to find a good solution on how to code the opponent's actions. Before we present our final technical demo, we just want to do a quick overview, and we've spoken to the team on our final weekly meeting, and we've asked them for some things that they thought we could have done better or things that we did right and we'd like to continue. So we're just going to have a one-to-one with each other as myself and Joshua Westmore, and we're just going to go back and forth and discuss those situations. I think the first one was applying the knowledge that we learnt from Altum, and now we can now use that for a future project, which is something I'm really excited about. We all gained some good insight. Yeah, I mean, what did you gain from an art perspective?
Definitely just gain some mileage with the quality of my art in general. Like, assets at the beginning of Altum are like not as well drawn or as animated as the ones at the end.
Yeah.
And like that's something I definitely gained from the project, just better art in general. But something I definitely learned is like how to animate much more quickly.
Okay.
Because when I started, I was so lost with it. I was like, oh god, what is this? Where am I going? And all that. So I'd say that's definitely something I'll take forwards.
Yeah.
Like, asset production will definitely be a lot quicker on the next project.
I think as well, because I went into Altum with more or less zero knowledge of audio softwares. Writing music was a bare minimal. I never really applied it to an actual project, and just the technical side when it came to audio was something that I've gone from zero and threw myself in a deep one from 0 to 100. And from that though, even though it was a struggle to begin with, from that I've learned a hell of a lot, and that's something that I definitely want to apply to future projects, and I think that'll be something really exciting continuing into whatever we do next. And I'm sure we were quite lucky to be placed in a team on RIM. We all have really good communication. And I couldn't have asked for a better team myself. And I know that from a coder's perspective as well, they've spoken about how they've been able to communicate with other programmers and really meet in the middle when it came to doing the technical side of Altum. So we've all gained some really good knowledge from this, some pros and cons. But even the cons are just something that we can learn from and get better over time. So there's nothing that went to waste.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for instance, I'd say one of the biggest sort of problems we had early on was what this game would be near the end.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't really have a clue. And I think in future projects, we should definitely spend more time
from the start.
Yeah, like early planning stage.
Yeah.
So we know exactly what our product's going to be.
Because there was a lot of technical difficulties which had to rewrite narratives. And we had to revisit certain aspects of Altum, and that drastically changed the final outcome from what we initially wanted in the beginning. I think originally we wanted several levels, but when we did our first ever pitch proposal of this idea, it was made very clear that we wouldn't be able to do that in the deadline that we had. So I think in the future, if we were to continue Altum, which is something that we've considered doing after the technical demo is finished, I think we will add more levels, because I mean we had like a fungus area, which is like the first proper level. This is supposed to be like the prologue of the game.
Yeah,
then we had like a fungus level. We had like an all like sea level in a massive cave, and there was a lot of interesting stuff which I think can really be can make Ultima a marketable game overall. I think as well in something else to address in Teaching Block 2, because we had a lot of deadlines coming up. We productivity reduced a fair amount, not a drastic amount where stuff wasn't getting done. We were all still being able to fill in our weekly updates with something that we had done, but there were from time to times where everyone was a victim of this, where we were caught up in other work. Maybe that's something natural for this project, but definitely something we should it highlights that we should plan a lot more.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it never hurts planning more, and I think this is an example of that. Another thing to bring up as well was the engine that we used. Initially wanted to use GameMaker 2. We were forced to use GameMaker 1, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it was 1.6.
It was 1.6, because it was free. You had to pay for a license for the other engine, but the programmers have spoken how they're really curious into venturing into Unreal Engine or Unity.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I think realistically we want to use the pipeline that we've learned from Altum and apply it to maybe a 3D project, or even if we were to continue a 2D project. I know the two engines have a really interesting 2D experience when it comes to development, but I think someone else we mentioned as well, I'd hand this over to you because this is right up your alley.
Definitely.
Is we only had one artist for the entire project.
I did all the art, the concepting, the designing, everything. Because it was a 2D project, it was just me drawing the whole time. And I feel as if next time we really need to think of a project where multiple people can do the art and
base the end outcome on what we have accessible when it comes to individual roles. I mean, the art outcome, I was really satisfied with it. And I know all the other guys were. We were really happy with the overall outcome, and we were really happy working as a team. But it's definitely to reduce. I mean, even just to increase productivity, probably base. It wasn't the wisest thing basing a 2D illustrated base project when we only had one artist.
Yeah,
So
not a good idea.
I mean, maybe we could have added more to the project if we had multiple. But with the cards that we were handed, I don't think he did a really good job of that. And I think another thing as well, we did, and it was extremely helpful. And this will be the final thing that we discuss, as we had weekly meetings. Sometimes we again, when I speak about productivity decreasing when we had other deadlines, it was we didn't really have meetings every week, but the majority of the weeks we had meetings, whether it was over Discord or Skype applications, or whether it was face to face, which I think were the ones that are more helpful.
Definitely.
We just spoke to each other, and it really increased morale, and it really just, everyone knew what everyone was doing. There wasn't a spare moment where I had no idea what someone else was doing, or no one had no idea of what I was doing. I'm sure yourself, you can vouch for that as well. So that's something that I really want to that tool helps communication, and I think that's something that I want to use in future projects.
Oh, for sure.
But with this project, an overall analysis of it is that, speaking on behalf of the entire Pink Sheet, we're really satisfied with the final outcome, and now we're happy to present our technical demo for Altum.
Arison, a safe haven for those who recover from a time that was plagued by conflict. War leaves its mark on the townspeople that it had victimized. As the town faded to darkness, criminal minds would take advantage and tear the people's home apart in a mass panic. It was only a matter of time before the district would ascend into madness.